Hi everyone, for today's math video we are beginning topic 12, which is all about decimals. So 12.1 is fractions and decimals. We're going to complete the solve and share, the look back, read a little bit on page 628 and complete the convince me, and then we are going to work on page 629 and complete numbers 1 through 6. So for lesson 12.1, fractions and decimals, our I can statement is I can relate fractions and decimals. So that's all we're doing today, is looking at fractions and then figuring out what the decimal is. We'll also be looking at like some pictures too to determine the decimal. Our solve and share says, according to a survey, 7 out of 10 pet owners have a dog. Use a drawing to show this relationship. So 7 out of 10 would be the fraction 7/10. We've talked about a lot of different ways to draw pictures to represent fractions. In class, I'm going to draw a bar diagram. And in my bar diagram, I want to have 10 sections. So for me to have 10 sections, I'm going to try to make this even. I need to have 5 on this side and 5 on the other. And then color in 7 of those sections. And I'm just going to write 7/10 underneath of it. Moving down to our look back. Math practice 2, reasoning. How many pet owners do not have a dog? Write a fraction showing this relationship. Well, looking at the picture, you can figure it out how many tenths are left over. How many people don't have a dog would be 1, 2, 3. So 3/10 do not have a dog. All right, how can you write a fraction as a decimal? That is our goal for today. So our example is on Kelsey Street, 6 out of 10 houses have swing sets in their backyards. Write 6/10 as a decimal. So this picture just shows the 6 out of 10 houses with swing sets. Write 6/10 as a decimal. Use a grid to help. So here is the grid, kind of like the bar diagram that I drew. There are 10 houses, so each house is 1/10. 1/10 equals, this is how you write it as a decimal, 0.1. So the point would be the decimal. I'm going to show you the place value chart. In a place value chart, we have the hundreds, tens, ones. We're familiar with that. Where the decimal is, it's going to come after the ones place, and then anything on the right of that is into our decimal points. So in the decimals that we'll look at today, we'll see tenths and hundredths. Notice that they end in the THS instead of the usual ending for the other side of the place value chart. Now when we're writing decimals into hundredths, so that next point, 1/100th, would be like a 1 penny out of $1 would be 1 out of 100, and that's how we would write it. So I'm just going to show you some decimals on the place value chart because I think this visual is a little bit more helpful than just looking at the black and white printed page from the book. So if you were writing, let's say like you had $1.67. The 6 would be in the tenths and the 7 would be in the hundredths. If we were looking at just the 67, let's say we took away the dollar, you had 67 cents. It would also be 67 out of 100 is equal to what we see here with the decimal point 0.67, and usually they put a 0 in the ones place just to show that there are no ones. If we were writing a decimal that did not have a hundredths place, sometimes you'll see, and this is representative of the problem, the 6 out of 10 houses. See how they write it here, 0.6. You see it there. I'll put the 0, 0.6, and sometimes you'll see a 0 here because 6/10 equals 0.6. That's the same as 60/100ths, which we would write like that. I'm not going to dwell too much on this. You can read through that yourself, but I don't want the video to be too long. I just want to guide you through how to actually do it. So looking at the convince me, would the decimal models for 0.6, which we would say as 6/10, and 0.60, which would be 60/100ths, be the same or different? Use grids to explain. So I'm going to color these really quick. So I labeled the tops of these so I know that this one is going to be 6/10 and this one is going to be 6/100ths. This is a misconception that you're going to make because you see a 6 here. You're going to only color in 6 of these. But that's not correct. 6/10, we need to take a whole tens row, and that would be 1, and we need 6 of those. So when you're coloring, you need to color 6 of the rows. So now that I'm done coloring, I can see that they will be the same, and that shows me that 6/10 and 60/100ths are equivalent. So the grids are the same because 6/10 is equal to 60/100ths. I'm not going to go through all of this up here just because you can read that on your own, but I am going to say that using money is a really helpful tool to understand decimals, because in daily life, that is the most common usage of decimals. So counting change is a good way to practice with decimals. So for number 1, how can you use grids to represent $4.71? These are the grids. So we're going to answer it with a sentence. We're not actually going to draw the grids because I think that that would take too long. So how many whole filled in grids would we have? Well, what is our whole number? It's 4. So looking at $4.71, you would have 4 wholes. So we would shade 4 whole grids. And then if we had another grid, we would have 4 whole grids, and then there would be 1 grid to represent the 71/100ths or 71 cents. So how much would we fill in? I'm looking at this as an example because this would be what it would look like if we had 4 holes. How many of these little boxes would be filled in? 71. So we would shade 71 boxes on another grid. Number 2, write a decimal and a fraction for the part of the grid that is shaded. I'm going to write the fraction first because that's what we learned first. So this is a little bit hard to see. I'm counting. First, I need to know what my denominator is, so how many parts are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, which makes sense because if we're writing decimals, we're going to be using tenths or hundredths as our denominator, and that's it. So how many are filled in? I'm going to count what's not filled in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means 5 pieces are shaded, and our decimal would be 5/10. That means that the 5 needs to be in the tenths when we're using the place value chart. So if I put the 5 in the tenths, my decimal would be 0.5. Number 3, first look at the amount of parts. So this is a hundreds grid. So that means our denominator is going to be 100. And how many little pieces are filled in? It looks like there are 4. So 4 out of 100. And the decimal would be 0.04. And if we were all together doing it in class, then we would be using a place value chart, because this is a very helpful tool in understanding the way that we would write it as a decimal. The 4 would need to be in the hundredths place because 100 is our denominator. So it's 0.04. For number 4, fraction first, we have 1 whole, so it's going to be a mixed number. 1 and, whew, that's a lot of little pieces in there. When I counted, I got 54, so that would be 1 and 54 100ths equals, I'm thinking about it in terms of money. If I had 54 out of 100, that would be 54 cents. So like $1.54. For number 5, our fraction first, we see all of the little individual hundredths, so we know it's going to be out of 100. When I counted, I got 39. So 39 out of 100 equals, that's how we would write it as a decimal. Now we actually have a little picture of money. So we have, ooh, that is hard to see. So we have a very fuzzy picture of money. These are dimes, so each of them is going to be worth 10. And these are pennies, so each of them is going to be worth 1 cent. So that's 10, 20, 1, 2, 3, 23 cents, which would be equal to 23 out of 100. So just make sure your directions say fraction and decimal. So make sure that you have fractions and decimals for each of these problems. And that's it for today. So I hope that you guys have an awesome day and enjoy today's video.